He was a hired Rosh Hashiva Panovich. And I had a very close encounter with him. When I was in Eretz Yisrael living as a Bocher, we went to Panovich for Shabbos. And besides the fact that I couldn't understand how anybody could have settled the Jewish community in a place that has such wicked heat and humidity as Bnei Brak, and they didn't have air conditioning was not very common when I was in yeshiva in the 80s. I think in the 90s it proliferated. I came in right before the AC boom, and I remember being in front of Mr. Shabbos, and between Glitzish yeshivas, between Shalosh Shudas and Ma'ariv in the yeshiva, they learned Mussar Seder. So there was a Mussar Seder in Panovich before Ma'ariv, Motzei Shabbos. And in most places in Eretz Yisrael, before Shabbos goes out, everything goes dark. I guess because the batteries are dead, the generators are off. I don't know exactly how that works, but it was pitch black basically. It's pitch black in this yeshiva in Panovich, and everyone's sitting and learning Mussar. And I had a brainstorm. How about, since nobody could see an inch in front of them, I'm going to walk right up to Rav Shach's stender, and I'll literally lean on his stender from the other side so I can hear him learning Mussar. I'll hear the words that he's saying. I thought that was a brainstorm. There's no way he'll ever be able to detect it because it's pitch black. And then I'll go back for Ma'ariv, and after Ma'ariv, so I'm there listening to him learning Mussar. It was quite interesting. And then all of a sudden, I didn't realize that they turned the lights on before Ma'ariv. And all of a sudden, the lights flash on, and my nose is maybe 2 inches from Rav Shach's nose, and he jumps back out of shock. Like, what's this big fat guy doing in my face? And I jumped back, and that was my close encounter that I had with Rav Shach. We didn't speak any words together, but I got his attention. Because they had air conditioning. Oh, you were before Vision? The Vision wasn't the new building, the beautiful new building? They built a beautiful new building and that had air conditioning.
By the way, there are plenty of people that don't understand how we live in Canada.
Because it's too cold here?
Cold, yeah. And Torontonians don't understand how people live in Edmonton.
I hear it.
So there's a pecking order here.
Yeah. We just learned yesterday from Trudeau that free speech extends to everybody on anything except someone criticizing Muslims. That violates free speech. That's not called free speech. That's controlled speech. Just came out yesterday because Trudeau was commenting on what happened in France, and Macron came out very strongly against Muslims. You're allowed to make cartoons. We have free speech in French, and in France we have free speech, and we're allowed to make cartoons. And writers and authors and satirical authors are allowed to do whatever they want, and you can't kill them for it. And Trudeau somewhat disagreed. Welcome to Kanadistan. Welcome to Kanadistan. Okay, let's just hope that Trump wins today. Okay. So we learned yesterday a halacha that if there was a bor that was in between two chatzeros, and the wall that separated the two chatzeros went right over the bor, and it didn't drop down into the bor at all, in the Mishnah, the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who was a lone ranger, he held that wall is good enough. That wall is good enough, even though it doesn't extend down into the cistern of water at all, it's completely above ground, that will be good enough, because you say that a mechitzat pluya is good, especially for the purposes of drawing water. That's right. That's right. The best. So the Gemara wants to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chananya, well, not the Gemara, Rabba wants to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chananya ben Yakavia, Amr Davar Echad. They both say the same idea that mechitzos, teluyos, hanging mechitzos, even though they don't extend down to the surface, will be adequate. Rabbi Yehuda ad Hamran. Rabbi Yehuda is our Mishnah. Rabbi Chananya ben Yakavia ditnan. Rabbi Chananya ben Yakavia Aimer gezustira sheyesh bo arba amish al arba amos. Imagine you have a flat porch. Let's imagine it's made out of 3/4 inch plywood, and it's 4 amos by 4 amos, or 24 tvachim by 24 tvachim, because there are 6 tvachim in an amma. So what you could do is, in the dead center of it, you could take a jigsaw and choykik ba dalet al dalet. If you cut out a hole that's dalet al dalet, which is the hole that you'd need to be able to create a Rishus HaYochid, because the minimum dimensions of a Rishus HaYochid is Daled al Daled. So you create a Rishus HaYochid. Now, right now you don't have walls. All you have now is you have a hole that's Daled al Daled in a flat piece of plywood, right? That's what you have now, once you drill the hole. Then, and what do? You make believe like your plywood is really paper, and you fold down all four sides around the 4x4 hole. And remember, if you started off with 24 by 24 and you've eliminated 4x4 because you jigsawed out that square in the middle, you're left with 10 tefachim all the way around. 10 tefachim is the exact length you need for a wall. So when you fold down the four walls, you've now created yourself perfect four barriers around the whole of 4x4. And there's a height of 10 of the barriers, exactly. So that's the same sheet as Rabbi Yehuda, because these barriers don't go all the way down to the water. The water could be 15 feet down, it could be 10 stories down. Yet, since you have 10 by 10 barriers, you have imaginary 10 by 10 barriers. You don't even have those. You have imaginary 10 by 10 barriers, so you have to imagine folding it down as well. It'll work. So Amalei Abaye, you don't have a right at all from Rabbi Yehuda that he agrees with Hananya ben Akavia. If you have a wall, not an imaginary wall, a real wall, but it's far removed from the surface because you're way up on the high story, we make believe like your walls extend down to the surface of the water. Who said that Rabbi Yehuda also allows you to imagine that the walls are folded down? That's a much bigger kula. Rabbi Hanani is actually imagining that you made walls when there's no walls there. Rabbi Yehuda holds that there's already walls. We'll look at it like they're extended down to the surface of water. But Rabbi Hanani comes onto an additional halachic innovation of imagination, and that's imagining that you're folding the walls down. Right, because the vertical plane of even a beam, let's say it's a 2x4, so it has a vertical plane of about 1.5 inches, right? So that's 1.5 inches is what we say at the beginning of the wall that we bring all the way down. The Atkan, for a curry, what thickness do you need?
When you start to say Gurach, do you
well, normally Gurach you need a full 10. P tikra yorid v'soisim is a different quote. Then you don't need 10 tefachim. And it's actually a shaila back there that Duvi mentioned, where we had the curry on top of the board that it goes down. It was actually a shaila if it's working with Gurachis, and then it's difficult because you don't have 10 tefachim.
Back to the beginning. The actual curry, we had, can I carry the inside?
That's right. So that's all using P tikra yorid v'soisim. That's not using Gurachis. Yatkan loy kom Rab Chanani ben Kavi Hasam ela b'yam shel tferia. Why was Rab Chanina Mekel? He wasn't a Mekel over any body of water. This luxury apartment that had this built-in plumbing system that they were able to draw water off their porch directly on Shabbos, that wasn't everywhere. That was only at the Tveria resort. He wouldn't have allowed this at Eilat. He only allowed it in Tveria. He wouldn't allow it in Miami Beach either, only in Tveria. What's unique about Tveria? Because it happens to be that the Kinneret, I'm sorry? That makes a big difference. That's right. The Kinneret has fresh water. There's water that's worth getting. Because Tveria, the Kinneret has unique topographical features. If you walk around the entire perimeter of the Kinneret, they don't just have regular shores. They all have certain type of borders. That's just naturally how it was made. Or not even naturally, that's how it was developed even. So Rash Ugnin Sofa Gavoya, there are sort of walls around it. The Havik Mechitza is Savavla. Ksas Hetera, Ksas Hakera de Heter. So the whole Yam Shel Tveria is less chomerdik because if you walk around its shores, you'll see that there's some type of walls, breakwaters. There's certain things all the way around it that created more of a Rishus HaYochid. So by the Kinneret only was Reb Chananya Nekavia Mekel. But who said Avol B'Shar Meimois Loy? Who said he would allow this in Eilat? So therefore, Rabbi, you claimed that Reb Chananya Nekavia and Reb Yehuda Amar Davar Echad. In fact, they're two independent halachas. Omar Abaye, Now we're pushing the envelope a little bit. So the first case was that all four walls were going to be constructed with our imagination, of course, but we're going to be constructed with this piece of plywood that's 4 amos by 4 amos. Now we're going to find, what I'm thinking of is we have a rule in the shul, you have to wear masks. If you're Mako, you can wear a plastic shield. And then you have these people who wear that plastic shield that connects to their chin, and it's maybe the size of a quarter, and that's called a plastic shield. So that's what we're going to be doing over here. We start off with a full face mask. You need 4 amos by 4 amos, you need a big, massive platform. Now we're going to start showing you how you could cheat the system to use a smaller platform, and it'll still work. And, I'm sorry? Like yarmulkes, exactly. So what happens, normally when you have a porch, it's coming right off of a wall. So you don't need a platform to be all 4 walls. You only need 3 walls, because why don't you use the wall of the building as the 4th wall? So that's what the Gemara is going to suggest over here. What if the porch was close to the kaisel? So imagine if you walk out your porch door and there's a gap. If you walk right out the door, you fall down 10 stories straight into the kinneret. That wouldn't be so geschmack. But that's what you had. The porch didn't start right at the entrance. There was a 3 tvachim gap between your porch and your room. So when you walk onto the porch, you have to take a jump. So if that was the case, so let's figure out how it would work. Then so let's think about this. I have a platform. I need a hole that's 4 by 4, right? Now, if I have 3 tvachim, of a gap in between the wall of my building and the edge of the board, so all I have to do is notch out a 1 tefach by 4 tefach groove out of the 2 by 4, and now I have my 4 by 4 hole that's right up against the wall of my building, right? Now, I fall down the other side. Now I have the outside wall and I have the inside wall, right? And then I fall down the 2 sides, and those two walls are also good. Now, those 2 walls are going to be 3 tefachim away from my wall, but we say lovely. So therefore, right. So Zok the Gemara, what do you have over here? This isn't the small mask. This is just the face shield. We're going to get to the small mask soon. So let's look at what the Gemara says over here. So if the flat plane of your porch was within 3 tvachim of the vertical wall of your apartment building or of your hotel, then you still need the same length of dalet amis, because you need to have 10 tvachim on either side of the hole. But you don't need dalet amis for the extension out from your wall out. There you only need a board to be 11 amis, 11 tvachim and a mashu. Why? Because you bend down 10 tvachim, and then you bend it down 10 tvachim, and then the other tefach is part of what you're going to drill out. It's part of what you're going to chisel out, because you need the full 4 by 4 opening. Okay, now the Gemara goes even further. Hoyz a kufa. Until now, we're talking about a porch that's horizontal. What if you had a plane outside your hotel room that was vertical? So you didn't even have a horizontal. So you had a beautiful piece of plywood, that was suspended in midair, parallel to the wall of your hotel. No porch.
What do you mean by this? What's the proportionality?
Now I don't need such a big. I don't need to be 4. That's right. I could use a smaller board. So now, what happens if this board is actually vertical? Okay, what if this board is actually vertical? So basically, I'm imagining a sheet of plywood that's hovering in the air, parallel to my hotel room. So I open up my sliding door. You don't dare step out. You're going to go straight down. But you, about 2 feet away from you, there's just a piece of plywood that's blocking your view, but it's suspended there about 2 feet in front of you. So let's say you had that. So how is this a kufa? I mean, it could be it's connected with some verticals. Maybe it's used as a window shade. But you had this vertical piece of plywood right outside. When you open your sliding door, you're staring at a piece of plywood. Then it has to be 10 tvachim wide or high, because it's in the vertical shape. I don't have to imagine turning it down anymore. Now it already is turned vertical. So I need 10 tvachim, because that is the size of a barrier that I need. But for the width, I would only need that it should be vav tvachim ushnei mashin. it should be 4 tvachim to mashin. Why is that? Very simple. Because 6 tvachim to mashin. Why? Because the outside wall, I only need the outside wall to be 4 tvachim. I'm trying to build a wall around a 4x4 square, right? So the wall opposite me only has to be 4 tvachim wide. So if I have a wall opposite that's 4 tvachim wide, it looks exactly like this plastic shield. If from here to here I only need 4 tvachim, then I can fold this side around. I can fold this side around, right? So that means if it was 6 tvachim and 2 mashin, that means I have 4 in the center, and on either side I get a tavach and a mashu. And then, as long as I'm within 3 of the wall of the hotel, I have the 3 walls, and then I have the 4th wall, which is the wall of the hotel. All I do is I open my window, and I drop my pail down, and I'm in a rishus hayochid, so I have a barrier. So now we've already reduced it to 10 tvachim by 6 tvachim and 2 mashin, down from 24 by 24. But it gets better. What if you had a corner office, not an outside corner, an inside corner? What if you're at an inside corner? So I already have 2 walls. I can use 2 walls of the building. This is like building a sukkah. What if you have a corner? So you already have 2 walls of the building. Now I only need 2 corners. What do you mean it's going the wrong way? I have a corner, right? I have a corner. So I have an L shape. Now I only have to build an L-shaped wall in the opposite corner. And then I have 4 walls.
If you're on the inside, if you're going on the outside, the wall is going the opposite direction.
No, because let's say you're in the room and I'm outside. Let's say I'm the window washer. You're inside the room, right? So here's one wall, here's the other wall, and you're right over here staring at me. Let's say you're right over here.
You're inside.
No, I'm outside. Let's make believe I'm outside. And this plastic is not the wood. This plastic is the wall of the hotel. So your room is right over here. You're staring at me from right here, and the wall of the hotel goes this way. So the hotel is L-shaped, right? And you're staring at me right over here. You have this wall already. If you open your window, you already have the wall of the hotel. You also have this wall. Imagine your room is right here.
You're trying to create these walls.
So let me show you what we're going to do.
The other way around.
No, I'm trying to.
You're already inside, and that shield.
No. The case is you're in the Karen's office like this. So you're in this room over here, and the hotel wall turns. What? Each of the corner has it like that. Each corner has it like that. You know why they did it? Because you can get 2 corner offices. That's right. So it's like the corner of the First Canadian place. So you're in one of those 2 corner offices. So if you're right over here and you have a wall coming out perpendicular to your wall, so you already have 2 walls. All I have to do is create a small L bracket over here, and as long as I'm within 3 tvachim of this wall, and within 3 tvachim of this wall, I get my lovut. So you have your little chutes that you could drop your stuff out for. So let's see how the Gemara describes it. So what happens if if you were in a corner? So then all I need is I only need this board to be 10 tvachim high. And its width only has to be 2 tvachim shnei mashin, because I'm just going to fold it in half. It's going to form an L bracket, and as long as there are tevach and a mashu, we could bring it within 3 tvachim of each of the perpendicular walls, and now I have 4 imaginary walls. So you could really minimize. So from 24 by 24, we whittled it down to 10 tvachim by 4 tvachim by 2 tvachim and 2 mashus. So, Frank the Gemara, now that you've shown me how you could really reduce it that much, so let's go back to the original halacha that Hananya said. Why would I ever need that? You've shown me no matter what the configuration is, I can get away with a much smaller piece of wood. So that's if it was made. I guess if it was in the middle of nowhere and it was far away from the wall, then you'd have no choice. If it was so far away from the wall, it was not within 3 tvachim of the wall, and it was just suspended, then you have no choice, and you need to use your origami skills to create all 4 partitions. And not only your origami skills, your imagination of origami skills in order to be able to make it work.
What was this last answer? The overlaid kiosk?
There's no wall near where this platform was.
So we have a whole 15 case?
It's not up against the wall.
You mean
The vertical wall of your hotel
is where?
is too far away from where the platform was. So imagine you're in a hotel.
Why is it too far?
because that's how it was built. That's how it happened to have been
How
built.
far is that? How far is too far?
You cannot say love it. So more than 3 tefachim.
Okay.
So imagine you open up your hotel sliding door
Mhm.
and you have a couple of beams sticking out from the hotel, right? But they didn't put a floor there. The floor starts 3 tefachim out,
Okay.
and then there's a 4x4 amos by 4 amos platform, but it's more than 3 tefachim away from your hotel room. So there, in order to make that work, you'd have to have at least 4 amos by 4 amos. That's another option. Yeah. So imagine a guy's in a hotel room and he pulls out his jigsaw and starts cutting the floor of the porch out. But that probably wouldn't happen. The hotel would probably be prepared for him. When you go to hotels in Israel, they say we have a plata, we have a this, they're showing off all their accessories. We have Halav Yisrael, we have cable TV. They're showing off all their accessories that they have. So one of them is that we have a hole in the porch. We have a hole in the porch so that you can draw water on Shabbos.
Well, I imagine you a little bit different. I imagine the Furby coming there, putting up a vertical wall because it's nice.
Right?
But he was there during the week, and then the second guy comes and he needs something for Shabbos.
So he builds on top of that.
He builds up.
Very good. Gewaltig. Okay, Zok the Hele Gemara. Now we're going to get into a little bit of a new sugya. Amas hamayim shi overes b'chotzer. Imagine you live in a chotzer and you're fortunate enough that a brook of water runs right through your chotzer. Some people have that under their houses, especially in our neighborhood, right? There are some houses in our neighborhood that if you break the floor, right underneath it is water already because the water table is very high.
And you shouldn't complain because they announced it on the street.
That's right. That's right. It's called Brook Avenue for that reason. So Amas hamayim shehi overes b'chotzer. You're fortunate enough that if you look out your window of your house, there's a brook of water running right through it in between your house and the next house in the chotzer. How convenient. And what happens? Ein memal heimen b'Shabbos. You're so thirsty, you're excited to draw water out of there to use in your what's that Israeli soda machine called? Soda stream. You're excited to draw water and put it into your soda stream machine. You're very excited, but ein memal heimen b'Shabbos. You cannot fill it up on Shabbos. Ella imkain also lo mechitza gvoya yutvachim. You have to make a mechitza that's 10 tvachim high. V'chnisu v'yitzia. This brook enters the chotzer on one side, it runs right through your chotzer, and it exits on the other side. So, being that the brook is part of a carmelis, it's like a body of water, which is a carmelis, and you won't be able to take from a rishus a yochid to a carmelis, or vice versa. So you have to break off, you have to sever the brook where it goes through your property from the carmelis that it's connected to. And the way you do it is you have to put a wall of 10 tefachim where it enters your property and where it leaves your property. So even though it's automatically breaching your wall, how does it get into your property? It's got to be breaching your wall, but maybe we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the wall around your property is good enough to be a barrier inside the brook. You have to actually have a wall inside the water itself, similar to the Mishnah that we learned yesterday. Well, we already learned that it doesn't have to be a wall that water cannot permeate.
Oh, okay.
Water can permeate it. Tosha said beferish, we're not talking about a wall that's going to be, it's not a dam, it's a wall. So water gets through it. It's all symbolic to create a perception of Rosh Hashanah and remove the status of carmelis from it.
Details on it? Like, is it a screen?
Well, we learned it could be reeds. It could simply be vertical reeds. So it could be very, very simple.
And very close together, like a structure. Like
You could probably build it with even a netting type of material, right?
the more dense the screen is going to be,
The more it'll obstruct the water from flowing. The more it will rest. So you could make it in such a way where water can probably flow through it. We're soon going to see in the Gemara that it could be even a fence that's missing pieces of it. And it's also good. It's more symbolic to show that this is no longer a carmelis. So the lochad einma mal amen b'Shabbos elam ken oslo mechitza gvoya tesfachim yutvachim v'chnisa uveyitzia, where it enters and where it leaves your property. Rabbi Yehuda Omer koisel shal gaba tida mishum mechitza. Our Rabbi Yehuda who holds anyway, if it comes into your chotzer, there was a wall around your chotzer. The wall around your chotzer is going to be good enough for a mechitza, which is exactly what Rabbi Yehuda said in the last Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Maisa ba'ama shal evel. There was an amma. Well, that's the wall of your chotzer, right? When the brook gets into your chotzer, so Ma'aseh b'Amah shel Evel. I think the name of the city was Evel or Avel. Does anyone have an art scroll? Ovel. The city was Ovel.
how do you know how to pronounce
We have Nakudas, an art scroll. They used to, the people of the Chutzer would draw water from this Amma based on the psak that there's a kenim allowed them to do it. So Rabbi Yehuda is proving to the Chachamim, you see, you don't have to put a special wall. There's no special wall. So obviously the Chachamim hold like me that the wall around the property was good enough. They told Rabbi Yehuda, the reason why they didn't require a special barrier for that wall, for that Amma, is because it didn't have enough. It wasn't big enough. Not big enough. We're going to have to see what that means, because the Gemara is going to struggle to understand it. But let's just see what Rashi says over here. Carmelis, it wasn't big enough to be a Carmelis. For instance, either it wasn't 10 tvachim deep, and if it's not 10 tvachim deep, water will not be classified as a Carmelis. Or maybe the brook was not 4 tvachim wide. And then water will not take on its own distinct rishus. Rather, it'll blend into the rishus that it's passing through. Unless it's a significant body of water, meaning it's at least 10 tvachim wide, it's at least 10 tvachim deep, at a width of 4 tvachim, then it's distinct, and it could be a carmelis. But if it's smaller than that, if it's a smaller stream, then it's bottled to whatever rishus it's passing through. The Maveres Rishus Harabim have Rishus Harabim, and Rashi goes on. So the Mishnah is saying is that the people responded to Yehuda, your story in that city happened to have been a smaller brook that would not have got a status of a Carmelis. It would have been blended in, and it would be a Rishus Hayah. Tell them about what if they made a barrier where the water comes in to the Chatzar, but not where the water leaves? Or you would not be able to use that water from the brook on Shabbos. Elam kain also la mechitza yutvachim. You would need a mechitza v'tvachim b'yitzia uvechnisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer koisel shal gaba tida mishum mechitza, which is our Rabbi Yehuda again. Am Rabbi Yehuda ma'aseh ba'amas hamayim shoyse ba me'ovel tzipori. It was going from Ovel to the city of Tzipori. V'hayim memalhem in the Shabbos, and they would use it on Shabbos. Al piyaz kainim. So the Rabbanim allowed it. Amruloi, so the Chachamim told him back, Misham Raya. From there, if anything, it's a right to our perspective, or actually not. Misham Raya is a derech tema. From there, you have a Raya. That's not a real brook. It didn't have the right shear, and since it didn't have the right shear, it doesn't need any barriers. But if it was a serious brook, you would need the walls.
The fact that the water that we grew on Shabbos was here before the brook that came on Shabbos is not an issue.
We actually had that shaila a couple of days ago that the water is coming through, but yeah, I don't think we worry about it. Tanya Idach, but the Gemara is going to talk about it a little bit, about water that's designed to leave your issue. So it is going to be discussed today. Right. No, but the Gemara talks about a cesspool. If you have a pit, a sewage pit, so there it's designed to flow out. We'll see. The Gemara is going to talk about exactly. So if I had clarity right now in the Gemara, then I could answer you after that. Now all I can tell you is I know we're going to encounter something related to that. Tanya, we'll get clarity together. Tanya Idach. We learned another brisa. You have a brook of water going between windows. But again, it's the same thing. You have two houses, and there's people have windows overlooking the brook, and you want to lower down the pail from your window to draw water up from the brook that's in between your two homes. So pachas migilmo, if it's less than 3, and exactly what we're talking about when we say less than 3, the Gemara is going to get into. But if it's less than 3, then mishal shel daliyim amali, and there's no problem. You're allowed to lower your bucket down from the window into the brook to draw water. But gimel, but if the brook is 3, ein mishal shel, you would not ein mishal shel daliyim amali, you would not be able to do that. It's not 3 that's the number, it's dalet. Pachas medal mishal shel daliyim amali, dalet ein mishal shel daliyim amali. So the Gemara wants to be ma'askin exactly what is this 3 and 4 shear that's going to determine whether or not you need a wall or not. If we're talking about the actual width of the brook, so the machlokes is if the brook is 3 tvachim or more, I have a problem. Or Shimon Gamliel holds if the brook is 4 tvachim or more, I have a problem. And we're talking about the width of the brook. Well, Zok to Gemara, that doesn't make sense. Ein Carmelis, Pechusa midalid. Rabbi Yirmiyah said that a carmelis could never be less than Dalid Tvachim, right? It has to be Dalid Tvachim or Dalid Tvachim. Otherwise, it's a Mokum Patur, right? You're now saying, are you saying it's totally this machloikis between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and Tanakama? If it becomes a carmelis? Because if you want to say that the brook is totally in 3, if it's less than 3, it's not a problem. If it's more than 3, it's a problem. You're saying that at 3 becomes a carmelis. And Reb Shimon ben Gamliel is saying at 4 it becomes a carmelis. But we have this general rule from Reb Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan that a carmelis is always 4. So Rabbi Yochanan would say something, would declare something, even though it's totally in a machlokes tanoim. Doesn't make sense to say that. So it must be that everybody agrees that the minimum shear for a carmelis is 4. And that means this brook, if it's less than 4, there's no problem filling from it. If it's more than 4, you have a problem filling from it. So what is this machlokes tanoim about 3 or 4? What are they discussing? They're not talking about the width of the brook. What they're talking about is, it's not like right down your window. If you open your window, you go straight down, you're going to hit the water. Rather, there was a little bit of a border on either side around the river. So there was like a little barrier around the river on either side. So the question is how thick that barrier is. If that a piece of dry land, that's right. It could be a bank, a piece of dry land. That's right. So it's not like Venice where the blocks of your home are right up against the water. There was the riverbanks, there were ledges on either side. And we're talking about the size of the ledge. So it's up to So what we're talking about is, we know that less than a mokum dalad al dalad is considered a mokum tour, right? And so therefore, if this little bank here is a mokum tour, for sure we're talking about a brook that's a carmelis. And you're for sure not allowed to lower your bucket down from your window straight into the carmelis, because you're going from a Rosh Hashanah to a carmelis. Well, what about lowering your bucket down onto the bank, which would be a mokum patur, and then once it's on the bank, you lift it up again and then lower it into the river. So there you're only going through a mokum patur. Now I know you're all going to jump on me. You're not allowed to use a mokum patur as an Indian reservation to go back and forth. And the Gemara is going to bring it up. But right now, the Gemara is suggesting that if the bank would be a mokum patur, then you could first lower your bucket to the bank and then continue on to the river. So it means instead of having a direct flight, you have to have a connecting flight. You have to stop off at the bank. On the way to get to your water, you have to stop off at the bank. And the machloikis between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Tanakama is, what is the maximum size area you can have and still be considered a mokum patur? According to the Tanakama, it's 3. If the bank is more than 3 tvachim, it's no longer a mokum patur. The bank itself will become a carmelis. But if the bank is less than 3 tvachim, then the bank will be considered a mokum patur. So then, what the Bryce is saying, if it's less than 3 tvachim, if the bank is less than 3 tvachim, then you could lower your bucket down to the bank from your Rosh Hashanah to the mokum patur, and then you could lower it from the bank into the water, which is going from a mokum patur into a carmelis.
What are you saying? Now you have there's an area that's not a carmelis, and not an open tour.
It is no. It's either a carmelis or a mokum patur. It's either a carmelis or a mokum patur. If it's less than 3 tvachim, then it's a mokum patur. If it's more than 3 tvachim, then it's a carmelis.
You just said that you can have a carmelis less than 4 tvachim.
Rabbi Yochanan said. Very good.
Everybody agreed with that.
Okay, so let's see what it says. Let's see what it says. Zok the Gemara el ba'akval ha'akvus. Fact the Gemara exactly what Shlomi Fanta was asking. Vaki Aser Abdimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mokum she'ein bar baraba muter levnei Rosh Hashanah v'levnei Rosh Hashanah l'chatev alav uvavlat shelo yachlifu. So really, he could have asked.
Yeah, that's even
Right, he's asking even more. Right.
I'm just making the
I hear. So Shlomi was asking. Rabbi Yochanan also said it can't be a mokum tour. The Gemara is asking even more. How can you suggest, even if it is a mokum tour, how can you suggest that you're allowed to go from your Rosh Hashanah to that mokum tour, and then from the mokum tour into the river to draw water? That's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said you're not allowed to do. You're allowed to go from the Rosh Hashanah to the mokum tour and back, and from the carmelis to the mokum tour and back. But to go through the mokum tour from the Rosh Hashanah to the carmelis, that's not allowed. So to Gemara, Hasam Rishuyas Deiraisa. Where did Rabbi Yochanan not allow you to do that? Where did Rabbi Dimi Rabbi Yochanan not allow you to do that? That's if there was a Rosh Hashanah on one side, there was a Rosh Hashanah on the other side, which are real Rishuyos. There was a concern not to use the mokum tour as a transition point. But Hacha, here we're talking about all Rosh Hashanahs here. The whole thing is only Midrabanan. Hacha Rishuyas Derabanan, since it's only Rishuyas Derabanan, there's no concern. Now, if you remember, we learned yesterday that also Chomer Devreim Yosy Mishal Torah. Right. So let's see what the Gemara asks. We'll prove to you that Rabbi Yochanan holds, even if there's a Rishuyas Derabanan on either side of the Makam Torah, even then it wouldn't be allowed. Itnan we learned, if you had a wall in between two chatzeres, and we learned this Mishnah, that was 10 tfachim high, and the thickness of the wall was 4 tfachim on top. My Rav and Shneim, they have to make 2 separate Eruvin because they can't join in there because there's no connection between these two chatzeres. They don't have the option to join in one big Eruv between them. And therefore, if there were pairs on top of this wall, which has a surface of 4 by 4, so it's a Rishus HaYachid, independent of both sides, each side can go up, but no one could bring the food, the pairs from up on top of the wall to their Rishus, because it's going from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid, and there's no air there. If there was a breach in the wall, ad eser amis ma'arvin shnai, up until a hole that's more than 10 amis, they have the option. They can either consider that opening as a doorway, and therefore, since it's a doorway, they can consider it closed, and therefore they can each make an independent Eruv. But since there's a doorway, they could also join in their Eruvin if they shoot Pesach. Yosy Mekan, if there's a breach in the wall more than 10 amas, we know you can't write that off anymore as a door. Now it's considered like there's no wall in between the two properties. Then they have to make one Eruv together, because once there's no wall in between the two chatzeres, automatically one wall. The Gemara asked over there, what if the top of the wall was not 4 by 4? So then it will be a Mokum Torah. Rav said, the top of the wall will be a mixture of both chatzeres from each side of the wall. You can't move anything on it. That's the Mishnah we looked. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, which is Rabbi Yochanan, said, each side can go up to the wall and carry food with them and carry food down. Now each side can communicate with carrying to the top of the wall, which is a Mokum Torah. And we said, what does Rabbi Yochanan and that Mishnah, where we clearly said Rabbi Yochanan said as halacha, is by 2 Rishuyos Derabanan, because there's a Rishus HaYachid on either side, and there's only an Rishus Derabanan to go from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid. So how can you suggest over here, where we also have 2 Rishuyos Derabanan, my apartment is Rishus HaYachid, the brook is a Carmelis, which is also only Asim Derabanan, and Rabbi Yochanan specifically said, even in such a circumstance, I'm not allowed to transport goods from my Rishus HaYachid into the Carmelis, even though I'm going through a Mokum Torah. It wouldn't be allowed. So you're shocked that you wanted to say in this brisa that it's a machlokes how big it is necessary to make a Mokum Torah, that simply will not work. Zok to Gemara.
One question on the bank, when we have this idea that it's private solution, doesn't it have to be 10 fucking high in order to do this Mokum Torah? You can't just have a...
Yeah, so let's say what's the talking about? Yeah. Yeah, if we look at Rashi, I think it's going off the floor. I don't know where you're measured from. I think you measured from the floor. So what does Rashi say? But when Rashi says over here, Ba'akpe, Diyesh Ba'ama Shir Carmelis, they're high banks. Mahani Lahavi Hanakapaim Mokum Tur. I'm sure he says it has to be 10, but it has to for sure be 10, because anything less than 10 is bottle to the Rishus on either side. Yeah. So Zok to Gemara, we have a problem over here. You want to say that there's a machlokes tanoim as to how big a Mokum Torah is, if it's 3 tvachim or 4 tvachim, but the problem is that doesn't work out, because regardless, you wouldn't be able, no matter what it is, you wouldn't be able to bring your bucket from the Rishus HaYachid into the Carmelis through this Mokum Torah. Zok Gemara, he's the Ira Amra. This Gemara that we just quoted, that prohibits by a Rishus Derabanan to go through a Mokum Torah. So the case of the Mishnah, like we just discussed, if you have a wall that's less than Dalet al Dalet, and the Gemara quoted from Rabbi Yochanan that you're not allowed to take from one chutzner, put it on top of the wall, and then bring it down on the other side of the wall to the other chutzner, that's Ze'iri. Hahi Ze'iri Amr. That's Ze'iri. We would disagree with that. And we would hold that by Rishuyos Derabanan, it's possible that you're allowed to go through a Mokim tour and you're allowed to traverse. So therefore, we're going to remain with our pshat, and that is that there's a machlokes what the size of a Mokim tour is. But if the bank is going to be a Mokim tour, then you're allowed to drop your bucket down from your Rishus HaYochid onto the bank of the river or the brook. That would be a Mokim tour. Then you lift it up again and move it into the brook itself, and you'd be able to draw water that way. And the same thing on the return trip. You pull water with your bucket out of the brook. You have to rest it on the bank, which acts as your Mokim tour, and then you could bring it up into your apartment.
It's very convenient anyway. The article said that it's a machlokes between Zeiri and the Dimi, what the Yosy said.
Correct. It will be a machlokes between Zeiri and Rav Dimi. So who's Zeiri Amar? In fact, Gemara, but Zeiri Kasha, doesn't Zeiri also need to have a pshat in the brisa? Zeiri also has to learn our brisa where we had a machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel as to if we're talking about 3 or 4. And again, we have 2 options in pshat. It's either referring to the actual width. It's either referring to the actual width of the brook, which we knocked off because then it's going to be a machlokes as to what the size of a brook is, or it means we're talking about the riverbanks, which then causes a problem with this Rav Dimi Amar B'Yechanan. So according to Zeiri Kasha, you cannot use this pshat of a riverbank because you cannot use a riverbank at all, even if it is a Mokim tour. So he's going to have to learn how Zeiri Moikim Lo Ba'amas Hamayim Gufa. Zeiri is going to have to learn that we're talking about the Amas Hamayim, so the machlokes is in the brisa, whether or not it's 3 or 4 is the actual width of the brook. That the Tanakama hold that if the brook is 3 tvachim wide, it will become a carmelis. And Reb Shimon Gamliel, the brook needs to be 4 tvachim wide to be a carmelis. And Reb Dimi Tanai, and even though we had Reb Dimi who said that the minimum size of a carmelis is 4 by 4, according to Zeiri, that'll be a machlokes tonight. So the Gemara and the Maraf didn't want to say that Reb Dimi's comment was something that will be totally in the machlokes tonight, but Zeiri is not going to have a choice. In fact, the Gemara, it's still going to be shver because it should be like chayre karmos. The sides, these banks, according to the way we were learning, that the bank is a mokum tour, it should still be a problem. You shouldn't be able to lower your bucket down onto the banks because with the habiki chayre karmos, it should be like if there's a hole in the karmelis. Rashi says, "Hi Amma, I feel less bashir karmelis," even though the I'm sorry. It's going back on Zeiri. Zeiri who learns that if the Amma itself is less than 4 or less than 3 tvachim, it doesn't have the halach of a carmelis, and therefore won't be usher. It should be like the edges of a carmelis. The edges of a carmelis are also treated like a carmelis because Rashi quotes from Gemara Shabbos that Chayr Rishus Rabbim done. So Rashi gives an example. Imagine you have a wall that's up against the Rishus Rabbim, and one of the bricks on the bottom is carved out. So there's the area in the footprint of the wall that's not in the Rishus Rabbim, that's in the footprint of the wall. It's called Chayre Rishus Rabbim. If you throw something from a Rishus Yachid into that hole, it's considered being mochi Rishus Rabbim. We say that the holes that are accessible, the corners, the edges that are accessible from the Rishus Rabbim have a status of Rishus Rabbim. So this brook, although it itself isn't the Carmelis, but surely it comes from a brook that was a little wider. A brook is connected to a larger river. So clearly, this brook, even though where it passes through your Rishus, is not the share of a Carmelis, but it surely should be considered like it's the edge of a Carmelis because it's connected to a body of water that surely is wider. But the Yaviki Chayre Carmelis. So tomorrow, Abaye Bar Avin, Reb Chanina Bar Avin, Darmi Tavayu, Ein Chayre Carmelis. This halacha that we consider the edge of a Rishus Rabbim as part of the Rishus Rabbim, that chumrah we do not apply to a Carmelis, which is only Osir Midrabban. So when the Rabbanan asks for Carmelis and tells you to treat it like a Rishus Rabbim, the chumrah, they didn't extend that to the Chayre Carmelis. Abashi Amar, Afilu Temi Yesh Chayre Carmelis. Even if you want to say that you do extend the status of a Carmelis to its edges, and therefore, even though this river, this brook going through our property is less than 3 tvachim or less than 4 tvachim, it should still be considered a Carmelis because it's connected to a Carmelis. Hanimili B'Smucha. That's only right near where it's a Carmelis. But Harabu Muflegus. Meaning, if the area of the brook that you're discussing is within 4 tvachim of where the brook is much bigger, yes, then we'll treat it like a Carmelis. But where we're measuring in our property, the brook the place where it gets bigger than 4 Tvachim is more than 4 Tvachim away from where it entered the property. So therefore, this here the brook here would not be considered even the edge of a carmels. Vina Amar, and this talks to Chaim Tzvi, going the Ovid Nifke Apuma. They didn't make a wall directly across to block the whole entrance of the water and the exit of the water. Rather, on either side of the brook, they put a little partial gate. So you have a little wall on one side of the brook and on the other side, but in between, the water can flow right through. So basically, on each bank, you put a little barrier, but you left a space to it, so water can travel through. The question is, how much space is allowed to be between the two walls? And that goes back to a machlokes we had. Under what conditions do you say lovid? We had a machlokes. The Tanakama held you say lovid only if it's less than 3 tvachim. Reb Shimon Gamliel say you say lovid if it's less than 4 tvachim. So therefore, he wants to know what the machlokes is. The case over here is you had 2 boards, one on either side of the river, and therefore there's a gap in between. Do we consider it like the board went across the whole river? So it depends how much space there is in between the 2 edges. According to Reb Shimon Gamliel, you're allowed up to 4 tvachim in between these 2 boards, and we still consider it like it's one big board. And according to the Tanakama, it has to be within 3 tvachim. So Zaktimur, based on that shita, you don't need to have a whole new machlokes. This is the same machlokes that they've had in the past as to when you say lovid. Do you say lovid only if it's less than 3 tvachim, or do you say lovid if it's even less than 4 tvachim? Hatfi's looking at me funny. He doesn't like that shot.
No.
It's the most latin shot.
He wants to make bigger water pressure. He wants to make the water fall. One of the other.
The reason why he's doing this is he wants to use it on Shabbos.
Right, but there are all kinds of other things. Maybe he wants to increase the body of water. I'm trying to think of like what happens to the water.
It doesn't even have to be a board. We learned that you can do your posts. As long as they're 3 tall.
That's right. That would have also worked. That's right. You could have had vertical posts.
My only question that's deep under my mind goes with this thing is why welcome to the film called the
Because the Indian reservation is a place where you can smuggle from one country to the next. The Indian reservations that are on borders are used to smuggle things from country to country without paying taxes. That's why I use for instance, Grand Island that is in between Canada and the United States. They always use the Indian reservation use their unique status when they're on the border to help smuggle through, and that's how they make money. They also have to make panusa. You know, Yidden used to make money also smuggling, so that's why originally when Israel was established, they were thinking of putting it in Grand Island. That would be mamish perfect. The Yidden could mamish go to their natural business.
We call it import-export.
That's right, the import-export business. Okay, so should we chaper in the Mishnah? We're only at 6:50. So chaper in the Mishnah. Zustera shilamayla malam. This is a Mishnah that we learned and understood and chewed and analyzed greatly already, so we could just rip through it. Zustera shilamayla malam. If you have a porch that's overlooking the water, you're not allowed to drop a bucket off that porch to fill up water for yourself on Shabbos. Unless there's a mechitza 10 tefachim around the hole. It doesn't matter if it's above the porch where the railing is, or if it's below the porch. As long as there's walls that are 10 tefachim, there's the kula of water that we extend those walls down to the water, and we say you're in Rosh Hashanah the whole time. This is another shayla we had. If you have 2 porches, one's on an upper level from the other one, and also they only made this arrangement with the walls in the porch for the upper porch, and they were both going to use access to the upper porch. Both are usher until they make an error, because we say that both people are sharing the access that was made in the upper porch, and since 2 people are sharing a common thing, there's going to be a problem of Erev Chatzeres, and they would have to make an Erev Chatzeres between themselves.
Well, I have to assume that there's a hole in front of the building.
No, because they're offset. It's like in Israel, you don't have porches stacked, because if you did, you couldn't make a sukkah. So we're talking about they're offset. So therefore, the upper one had a hole in it. So the guy on the bottom, if he wanted to draw from it, either he threw his bucket over there, or he actually went into the apartment and he used it. But speaking where these 2 apartments, they put their money together, and they only built this arrangement in one of the 2 apartments. And now they're sharing it. Yeah, we had this in the Gemara before. That we chewed this through so many times, and we had so many different trials of it. Is it because a dollar is apart? Is it because it's hard to throw? Is it because shulshul is either? There's so many different svars we had as to why it would be a problem. Okay. That's right. Okay, so let's just go quickly. But sneezing the loike chanani ben kavio, the tanya chanani ben kavio omer gzustra shesh b'dalad al dalad Gzushis with Dalad Alamis, Choykik Ba, Dalad Al Darim Amali. This is the Chnanya who hold you can cut the hole out and fold it down. Amr B'yech Mishor Yosy ben Zimra, Lahit Reb Chnanya ben Akavi, Ela B'yamish on Tveria. He only allowed this on Tveria. Hov Yesh Lo Ugnim V'Yayorish V'Karfifas Makivas Oysa. By the Kinneret, anyway the whole Kinneret is more kuludik. Since the whole Kinneret is more kuludik, he allowed this special imaginary folding the walls down in order to get your 4 walls. But by a lot, law you wouldn't allow it. Tanarban, we'll stop here because this already gets into Nusugya. Okay, Gavalt, Shkoyach. And we can cut brachas. We have 8 minutes to brachas. Thank you very much, everybody. Mati's Shkoyach, I like that smile.
What is here?
Mati's here.
Whoa.
Oh, Chaim, she's all excited. Oh, Chaim, if you don't know, Mati was here.
Yeah.
Mati, the whole line from Freitag over here. Now you got to tell us a joke. He's